So, good morning. Oops. Good morning, everyone. Was there like a dial tone on a phone that you just heard? I don't know. Anyway, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday. We've made it to the end of week 3. If you're here in Vancouver, it's dried out a little bit, which is nice, although it was raining this morning, but on and off. So, as I mentioned on yesterday, we'll do a quiz on Tuesday. I'm going to post some more particulars, but how it'll work is for online people, I'll do your quiz first, and it'll be sort of an oral quiz. So I'll call you in Microsoft Teams and I'll ask you questions. If you are here in the room, as you normally are, then I'll give you just a regular paper quiz like you would write in a normal world, which we don't live in anymore. But we'll pretend it's normal while we're writing the quiz, okay? So we'll do that on Tuesday, but that will mean, and I'll put this in Microsoft Teams so that you can all see it, but that'll mean that you don't have to come into class until about 11, okay? So you'll get a little extra time before class because I'll be in here talking to people who are online, and so you all can come in a little bit later or study somewhere else or whatever, okay? So Tuesday's class will start at 11 for people who are here, and then online people will start. I'll quiz them before that. Okay, so Daniel's here. Good morning, Daniel. Kennan's here. Good morning to you. Whoops. Good morning to you. Sam's here. Good morning, Sam. Shamimu is here. Hello. Amy's here. Good morning, Amy. Claire is here. Good morning. Vicky is here. Good morning. And Sabrina is here in spirit. Good morning. Good morning, Sabrina. Good morning. So that said, let's go to what we were talking about yesterday. And Jack's here too. Good morning, Jack. Are you in both places? Yeah? You're attending class twice? It only counts for one. It only counts for one. Okay. So yesterday we were talking about oppression, right? And we said that, hang on, I'm just going to fix something really quickly because Canon mentions that she's not on the social justice team, and that's no good. So I'm just going to add her right now, if I can. Hang on 1 second. Okay. Canon, you are added, so you're all good? Okay. So yesterday we were talking about oppression and what it is, right? And so we said it was kind of a relationship between social groups in which one group has an advantage or has more power or opportunity than the other group has, right? And so we called the group with power the dominant group. We called groups that are not in power minoritized groups. And we said the relationship between the dominant and minoritized groups is called oppression, right? Faye and Chan, you with me? Mike, you with me? So we read a little article, not a little article, we read a number of page article that introduced us to a few definitions and a few studies that are important and told us some things about oppression and stereotype and prejudice. And so we said that stereotypes are things that we kind of think we know about people based on what our eyes tell us, right? So we look at someone and we identify them as either, attractive or not, or a man or a woman, or we might identify them as the member of a certain race or ethnic group or religion. And the stereotypes are ideas, generalizations that kind of convince us, good morning, kind of convince us that we can know something about that person, but based on what we see, right? And sometimes those stereotypes have a bit of a grain of truth to them. And so I'm using this example stereotype here of Canadians saying "a" all the time. And there's a grain of truth to that stereotype. Some Canadians say A, some of them say it a lot. Not all of them do. But again, because you identify someone as saying A lot, you might think, oh, they're a Canadian, right? But we said that stereotypes usually have it doesn't really have anything to do with positive or negative judgments, okay? And prejudice is where those judgments come in, where we start to think of certain people or certain groups as good or bad, or something you like or something you don't, based on the stereotypes that you hold. And again, you can have positive prejudices or you can have negative ones. Usually we talk about the negative ones, right? When you hear the term prejudice or there's prejudice towards this, it's usually, you assume it's negative, but you can have positive prejudice as well, right? And then discrimination is where we act on that prejudice, where we do something or we don't do something based on those ideas that we hold, right? And of course, I used the example of the dog. Depending on the sort of experience and stereotypes you have about dogs, you might have a positive or negative prejudice towards dogs, and you might discriminate against them one way or another, right? You might tell your friend to, yes, bring over his dog, right? Or you might invite your friend over just so you can see the dog. Or you might tell your friend, definitely do not bring the dog. You're not coming over to my house if you have that dog with you, right? And so your prejudice can cause you to positively or negatively discriminate based on the stereotypes you hold. And so again, even if I show you this image, the stereotypes that you hold or the prejudice that you hold toward dogs will influence what you see, right? Do you see, a cute, cuddly, friendly little creature here, or do you see a potentially dangerous and scary animal, right? Could be either or. And we don't know, right? This could be a perfectly lovable dog. This could be a dangerous monster, right? But it's hard to know just by looking at him, right? But again, our prejudices and our stereotypes influence what we see. Just out of curiosity, how many people looking at this dog do see a cute, cuddly creature that you'd want to give a big hug? Yeah? And anyone look at this creature and say ugh, I'm not going near that thing. That thing looks way too big, way too scary. That's a big dog. It's a big German Shepherd, right? Okay. Just curious. We said that the types of prejudices that people hold tend to sometimes remain very stable, right? So we talked about the sort of association of Jewish people with money or being good with money and things like that, or having a lot of money. And that's a prejudice that has been very stable for hundreds of years. But prejudices may be stable, but the way people express them may change depending on what is socially acceptable, right? So yesterday we were talking about, in the United States, let's say in the 1950s or 40s, it was much more acceptable to express your prejudice against Black Americans if you had a prejudice against them. Whereas today it is definitely not acceptable, right? People know very clearly, even if they hold that prejudice, they know that they can't express it in public because there will be a pretty severe reaction to what they say. But of course, 70 years ago, not so much, right? You could get away with expressing your prejudice this way. And I tried to equate that yesterday with a prejudice towards people who are significantly overweight, right? And so I think we agreed that the stereotype around people that are overweight was that they were, maybe stupid or lazy or undisciplined, or they don't care about their health or things like that. And so what I was trying to argue here is that those prejudicial ideas, those negative stereotypes around people who are overweight, were what was behind Piers Morgan's tweet about Tess Holliday here on the cover of Cosmo, right? So we said that he was trying to sort of wrap his criticism in terms of concern for people's health. But again, I'm not really sure that that's what's happening here. I think this is Piers Morgan expressing his prejudice against Tess, and basically saying that her being on the cover is, irresponsible and dangerous because, she needs to be something else in order to be on the cover of that magazine, right? She needs to, she shouldn't feel good about herself the way she is. And I tried to argue that it's not Piers Morgan's place to tell her when she or when any woman can feel good about her body or when she can't, right? Piers Morgan isn't Tess Holliday's doctor, so he should shut up, in my opinion. Right? So, but again, this is kind of an expression of prejudice that a lot of people are okay with. And again, there was a lot of controversy about this cover. Some people thought it was, again, a great step forward for body positivity and for, accepting women of all shapes and sizes kind of thing. And then some people had a very negative reaction to it. And again, there is a bit of a grain of truth to this. I mean, carrying a lot of excess weight is not good for your body, right? It's hard on your joints, it's hard on your cardiovascular system. It may be associated with diabetes and other things. So, there are health concerns here, but, we have to be careful with the intent. And again, I don't think Piers Morgan here is concerned about Tess's health. Again, he's not her doctor. He doesn't really know how healthy she is or is not. Really, he's expressing that prejudice against people who are overweight, right? Yeah. So he and others felt very comfortable expressing prejudice against overweight people because it is justified as based on fact, right? So it's not criticizing people's character. It's not saying, oh, you're a bad person because you're overweight and that means you're lazy and undisciplined and care about your health. It's not that. They're saying, oh, you're unhealthy and I really want you to be healthy. But again, that's not what's happening here, right? That's not the value behind it. Okay. And I said that this is this sort of prejudice against people who are overweight has society, and particularly big business has a very good reason for allowing this prejudice to continue and pushing it, right? Because beauty companies and health companies make a lot of money convincing people that, any degree of being overweight is very bad. Hey.
Salah just called me his home. Can you send him the link?
Sure, I can do that.
Sorry about this.
It's okay, Baha. Thank you. Yes, I'm going to send that, I guess. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Okay. Where was I? What was I saying? Anna, what was I saying?
That they're investing in beauty.
Right. So there's a pretty significant financial investment for companies for people to continue to believe that fat is ugly and skinny is beautiful, right? And it's interesting, we may even take that idea for granted, right? And we might assume that, skinny being beautiful and fat being ugly, we might even take that as a natural thing. But it's interesting, if you look at other points in history, that's not been the case. If you look a few hundred years ago in Europe, being overweight was actually beautiful because the only people who were overweight were the people who were rich, right? If you were a poor peasant farmer, you couldn't afford to get fat, right? You just didn't have enough food. The people who were fat were the people who had money and had good food and were able to eat a lot of it. And so, a slightly larger figure was more attractive at the time. Now we've decided that that's not attractive anymore. This slimmer figure is. But again, this is people kind of expressing prejudice, and in this case, we have a beauty and health industry that to some degree is invested in convincing people that this idea is true, right? And this prejudice is based on fact. Okay. New stuff for today. So we said discrimination is action, right? That's where you do something or don't do something based on your prejudices. And so how we think about social groups, of course, determines how we act towards them, right? Just like the dogs, your stereotypes and prejudice about dogs influences how you interact with those dogs, right? And so people can discriminate in all kinds of ways, right? By ignoring people or by avoiding them or excluding them or making jokes or even threatening or violence. Even by kind of choosing not to include someone, you can discriminate. What's really interesting is that sometimes this discrimination is conscious, so people choose, like with the dog, I can choose to tell my friend, hey, I don't want your dog over at my house. But sometimes, actually in many cases, discrimination is unintentional and almost accidental. Let me share something with you here. So this is a paper that came out here, you can see in 2004. There's actually lots of studies like this. This isn't the only one, but this is one by, you can see here, Marianne Bertrand and Sendhil, Mulianathan. It's probably mispronounced, but that's okay, sorry. A little paper called, Are Emily and Greg More Employable Than Lakeisha and Jamal? A field experiment on labor market discrimination, okay? So we should probably point out here that in the US and in Canada, you may not discriminate against people based on their race or ethnicity or gender or sexuality or religious affiliation. So if I'm hiring someone to work at the college, I cannot hire them or not hire them based on their race or ethnicity. That is illegal, okay? And same thing in the States. So here's the little experiment that these two, maybe sociologists, these two scientists ran. So they responded to 1,300 help wanted ads. So they went through the employment section of the newspaper, maybe online, but maybe in real paper. They went through the online help wanted section. They found 1,300 ads and they responded to them with resumes, okay? And so the resumes were fictional. They were all made up. They were all made up education and experience. And the names were made up too, okay? So these resumes were a total sham. They were a total fraud. Now the difference between the resumes was some of the names were, they sent out 5,000 resumes. Some of the names were given stereotypically white sounding names. So like Greg Baker here and Emily Walsh, pretty white sounding. And the other half were given stereotypically black names. So Jamal Jones, Lakeisha Washington, those are stereotypically black names in the United States. So they sent out these resumes to all of these jobs in Chicago and in Boston. What do you think happened? What's that? White people get the jobs? What do you think? White people get the jobs? They did. They did. Yeah. So black people were discriminated against in hiring. And so what they found, what these two researchers found was that even when the black sounding resumes and the white sounding resumes had the same credentials, so the same qualifications, same education, same kind of experience, white names still got more callbacks than black names. And of course, the researchers could make sure that they had the same qualifications because it's all made up, right? So the resumes are basically identical except for the name that appears on the top. And so black applicants got fewer callbacks than white ones did. Even when their credentials were increased, so even when the resumes with the sort of stereotypically black sounding names had more experience or better education, white names still got callbacks. And the discrimination stays consistent across industry types. So They responded to ads for dishwashers in restaurants. They responded to ads for, you know, paralegals and teachers and all kinds of different things, right? So it wasn't just one type of job. It was a wide variety of different jobs. And they saw the same pattern of discrimination happening all the way along. Do you guys know who Cal Penn is? Does anyone know who Cal Penn is? Just give me a second here. Cal Penn. I'm just going to put him up on the screen here. You may have seen him. He's an actor. He's also very politically involved. But he's an actor. So, oh, there we go, good. So if you've ever seen or heard of Harold and Kumar go to White Castle and they go to Guantanamo. They're really kind of funny, raunchy sort of comedy films. Actually, you'd probably think they were funny. But this is Cal Penn here. And Cal Penn, when he was an actor, when he was starting out, he did this experiment with himself. And so as you can see here, his birth name here is Kalpan Suresh Modi. So that's his birth name. And so when he was applying for acting jobs when he was younger, he would send out his headshot, right, his picture, as actors do. But some of the pictures he sent out had Kalpan Suresh Modi written at the bottom, and he used that name. And some of them had Cal Penn. Who do you think got more callbacks? Cal Penn did. And it's the same guy. It's the exact same guy. But again, there was discrimination not only in this study. There's discrimination between black-sounding names and white-sounding names. But here you have discrimination against an Indian-sounding name, but it's the exact same guy, right? Like if you call back Kalpan Suresh Modi, you get Cal Penn. You get the same guy, but it worked even for him. So yeah, we see some discrimination happening. And so the question, of course, is what is happening, right? We see discrimination. Is everybody racist? Are all hiring managers in the US racist? And you know, to some degree, racism continues to be a problem in the US as it does in Canada and other places. But that's probably not, outright racism is probably not what's happening here. I think what would happen is that if we talk to all of the hiring managers, so everyone who reviewed those resumes and sort of made the call back, if we asked all of those HR people and managers, I think they would probably tell you that they weren't discriminating on purpose. They just felt that they were calling the person that looked like the best for the job. So there's probably a few racist people thrown in there, because there always is. But most people probably would have said, no, we didn't discriminate in hiring. We don't do that. We think it's wrong. We know it's illegal. We didn't do it. And so still, what's going on, right? Why is the discrimination happening anyway? And this is kind of where our socialization and our social messages come in. As we absorb different social messages from society, they start to frame the way that we see the world, right? And so just like the dog, depending on the stereotypes you've absorbed about dogs, you either see that creature as big and lovable and cute, or you might see them as frightening and scary, right? So here, what's probably happening is that these HR managers are reviewing these resumes, and when they come across a resume with a stereotypically black name at the top, so if they come across Lakeisha Washington, for instance, what kind of happens is that suddenly all of those kind of stereotypes around black Americans are triggered, okay? So and I don't mean triggered like upset, I mean like activated. And so almost what happens, if you can imagine, is that you look at the resume, you see Lakeisha Washington, and then suddenly you're looking at the resume through the stereotypes that you have absorbed. And sometimes this happens even without people realizing it. And so once those kind of filters are activated, and in this case they're racial, but they could have to do with gender or sexuality or religion or anything. In this case they're racial, but suddenly Lakeisha Washington's credentials are being read through the lens of black stereotypes, right? So all of her experience, all of her education is being interpreted based on the stereotypes that are circulating about black Americans, okay? And that negatively impacts her chances, right? When the hiring manager comes across Emily Walsh's or Greg Baker's resume, what happens? Well, nothing happens, because for the most part, the dominant groups aren't stereotyped in the same way. And so when the hiring managers are looking at a white person's resume, they're basically just seeing the resume, right? So they're basically seeing it, the credentials and the education and the experience, uncolored, if you will. That's not a, it's a bit of a pun there, but they're basically not seeing it through any set of filters. And so the white resumes are having their credentials and their experience evaluated legitimately, right, without any sort of influence. But the black sounding names, those resumes are being interpreted through the lens of the stereotypes around black Americans, right? And that negatively impacts their chances. And so that's why these white names are getting more callbacks, not because people are discriminating on purpose, but they're accidentally discriminating. They're interpreting the resume differently because of the name, and the thing is, they're probably not even aware that they're doing it. They're probably not aware that they're doing it. And so this is kind of part of the power of socialization and absorbing social messages, right? And I'll go back to Mean Girls with this too. Just like Katie is kind of socialized by Regina without knowing it, and then starts to kind of behave in those ways, similarly, people can absorb social messages and then act on them without really realizing they're doing it. And again, this study kind of demonstrates that that's happening. People are discriminating without even knowing it, because we're not dealing with thousands of racist hiring managers here, right? Again, probably some of them are, but most of them probably aren't. And so the fact that we see this pattern over 5,000 resumes, over 2 different cities, over all kinds of different types of jobs, shows that there's a systemic problem here, right? The stereotypes that are attached to black Americans in the US are negatively impacting their employment chances. And the thing is that nobody's actually doing this on purpose, right? Nobody is trying to discriminate against black Americans in this case, but it's happening anyway. And again, we'll get to it later, but this is one element of systemic racism, right? This is how people are disadvantaged without anyone really doing anything bad, right? Nobody's out to get anyone here. It's an artifact of stereotype, and it's an artifact of kind of the way that people's brains operate. So yeah, it's highly probable that these HR managers probably didn't even notice what they were doing. They probably didn't notice that they were discriminating in this way. They probably looked through all the resumes and thought, yep, I think this is the best person, I'm going to call them, without really knowing what happened sort of subconsciously for them. But again, as I'll mention, white-sounding names don't trigger any filters, because as the dominant group, and again, this works for any dominant group, not just race, other groups as well. Dominant groups are usually seen as the normal thing, the default thing, the thing without the kind of standard, if you will, okay? And again, I'm not saying that that's right or legitimate, I'm just saying that's kind of how it tends to work. And so in the US, white people are not seen as racialized, okay? And so again, they don't have any strong stereotypes associated with them, and they don't activate any filters when people are looking through their resumes. And again, I'm not saying this is right or correct, I'm just saying this is how it tends to work. And so again, their qualifications, their resumes are seen with no filter, right? They're just seen for exactly what they are. Whereas people of color, their resumes are going to be seen through a lens of those stereotypes, okay? Hang on. And as a result, many companies, to know about this, they have taken steps to make sure that names are actually removed from resumes before they come to HR managers. So there's no way for people to make any assumptions about the race or even the gender of the person. You're just looking at the resume and the experience, and you're judging based on that. And then once you say, okay, this is the person I want, then they match it with a name and call that person up. So some companies have actually taken the step to remove names so that this kind of discrimination doesn't happen, because they know that it does, and they know that it will accidentally, right? Not on purpose. But again, there's ways to fix this. Okay, let me ask you this. Here's a question for you. Former President Barack Obama, who I miss so much. Barack Obama here, former President of the United States. Is he black or white? Black? Okay. Most people seem to agree that Barack Obama is black, and that's a legitimate thing to say, right? He does look like an African American, right? He does look black. He has portrayed himself or presented himself to the public as a black man, right? That's how he has identified to Americans, and so it's definitely not surprising that people would say that about him. Do you know anything about his ancestry, Obama? No? Obama is, I don't know a whole lot about him, but he's born in Hawaii. And Salah says, yeah, he has a mixed race background. So his father is black, he's from Kenya. His mother is white. She is from, I forget where, she's from somewhere in the United States. And I think she was doing some work in Kenya at a university, and they met, and then they moved to Hawaii for a bit, and then they had Barack, and then his father left, and he was raised, I think, mostly by his mother. So he has kind of mixed ancestry, but he's presented himself, he's identified himself to the world and to the country as a black man, right? But here's where it gets interesting. Actually, it depends. So psychologists did a little study, and what they did was they brought a bunch of people in. The people don't really know why they're there, because that's how psychological studies work. You bring them in and you don't tell them what you're really trying to do. You kind of lie to them a little bit. Brought in a bunch of volunteers and gave them a bunch of pictures of Barack Obama. And these pictures had been photoshopped a little bit. They'd been edited. So in some pictures, his skin looked a little bit darker than maybe it naturally is. And in some photos, his skin looked a little bit lighter than it naturally is. Not too much, right? They had to look natural and believable, but they just shifted his skin tone a little bit darker or a little bit lighter. And they asked these participants, they asked them, which photo is most representative of Obama, right? Which one looks the most like him, okay? And so students had to say, okay, I think this looks the most like Obama. This is what he looks like in real life. Here's where it gets interesting. Now, students who were liberal, so students who were supporters of the Democratic Party, which Barack Obama belongs to, they thought that they chose the photos in which his skin looked lighter. interestingly. Conservatives, or people who were more kind of on the Republican side, who are like the enemy of the Democrats, they tended to see him as a little bit darker. So apparently in this study, you can see this adjusting for any racial prejudices that people have. And it even works with people less famous than Obama, right? So we all know who Obama is, but it works with just regular photos of people. And so, yeah, and lastly, regardless of what their political views were, people who associated lighter photos with him, so people who thought the lighter photos were more what Obama actually looked like, were more likely to vote for him. So here, is your mind blown? Yeah. So here, what's happening is that people are actually changing the way that they see him. They're changing the way they see the color of his skin based on their political views. So if your political views align with Obama's views, you are more likely to see him as lighter skinned. If you are not in alignment with Obama's views, you are more likely to see him as darker, which is wild because obviously the man is only one color, right? He doesn't change colors like a chameleon, right? Or like a mood ring or something. He's one color, but people see him differently or perceive him differently based on their political views and whether they kind of agree with him, yeah, right? Whether they agree with his policies or not, which would be very interesting because I agree with, I like Obama. I like what he stands for. I like what he does. I have a lot of respect for him. And so I'm curious, like if I did the test, would I choose a lighter colored photo of him? You know I used this one to sort of introduce this thing, and his skin looks fairly light in this photo, but I don't know if that is representative of him. Like obviously he's in the Oval Office here, and there's all sorts of lights shining at him and the camera, and so it's a very professionally done photo. I don't really know if that's what he looks like in real life. I've never seen him, unfortunately, but I'm curious to know which kind of photo I would choose based on the fact that I do like him and respect him, and my political views are in alignment with his. So what's going on, right? Barack Obama is not changing color, so how do these people see him differently? And so the leader of the study here, Eugene Caruso, says that this is likely the result of two prejudices or two biases circulating in American society. And so one, the positive association with lightness and whiteness. And so lighter skin is more positively viewed than darker skin. And again, I'm definitely not saying that that's correct or true, but that's just the stereotype or bias that is floating around under the surface. And there's also a tendency for people to view people of the same group more favorably than those of another group. And we talked about that in the article, right? That was that the social, what was that one called? There was information, there was adjustive, what was it called? No, it wasn't the value one. Maybe it was the social identity theory, Tajfel's social identity theory, that you want to feel good about yourself, and so you often feel good about people that belong to the same group as you do, right? And so I have kind of broadly liberal political views, and so when I see Obama, I'm like, oh yeah, he's one of mine, right? He thinks about politics the way that I think about politics. So he's in my group, right? He's on my team, or I'm on his team is probably more what it is. I'm on his team. And so I'm more likely to see him favorably. I'm more likely to see him as a good dog, not a bad dog, if you will, right? I'm going to connect my dog metaphor from before, or example from before. I'm more likely to see him as a good dog. And so, but because of this positive association with lightness and whiteness and white colored skin, people are also choosing the photo that makes him seem lighter than he actually is. And so, again, I would love to do this study, although now that I know about it, it would probably be ruined. But I'm curious to see if I would, in fact, choose a photo of him in which he looks lighter skinned than he actually is. But it works. It works for, it worked for this study. It works for people other than Obama. And so, again, people's stereotypes and prejudices not only affect their behavior, so they may discriminate against people on purpose or accidentally, like when they're hiring them, but actually changes the way that they see people. It almost changes the color of their skin, if you will, which is bizarre, right? And this is important, right? Because right at the beginning, I said that part of this critical theory approach was understanding that we all see the world a little bit differently based on our socialization, right? Based on our upbringing, based on our culture, we all perceive things a little bit different. And here is the proof, right? That people's socialization, people's ideas, even if they're not entirely aware of them, and even if they don't consciously believe in them, this is the evidence, right? People are actually seeing reality a little bit differently based on their political views. Weird. Okay, speaking of discrimination, can you think of any examples of discrimination in Mean Girls? So places where people were chosen or not chosen, included or not included, things were said to them or things that were not said to them based on a social group that they belonged to. So not something that they did, right? But something that they were. And I know that was a few days ago, so this is probably a tough question now. But what do you think?
Like Katie couldn't speak to Janice, I think, when Regina asked her, who are you talking to?
Okay. Right, so Katie was expected to discriminate against Janice, right? Janice is in a lower level of the social hierarchy, right? The plastics don't talk to people in the lower part of the social hierarchy, please, right? They don't do that. And so Katie was expected to discriminate against Janice, not to talk to her or to, say something bad about her, which she did, right? She was like, oh my God, she's talking to me about, I think she's on crack or something, right? So Katie made something up to sort of go along with the situation, but she was expected to discriminate against Janice based on her being in a lower part of the social hierarchy, and maybe because she was assumed to be a lesbian, right? Because that was the other thing as well. Although, I don't know if we talked about it. Did you catch it at the end that, when Kevin Napur starts dancing with her, and she says, and he says, what are you, Puerto Rican? And she says, no, I'm Lebanese, which kind of sounds like lesbian. So I wonder if that's the joke. Everyone thought she was lesbian, but she's Lebanese. I don't know. I'm not sure if that was the joke or not, but anyway, that's a good one. Other positive or negative discrimination. Say that one more time, but a little bit louder.
You said that joining mathletes was social suicide.
Right, joining mathletes was social suicide. So if she became a member of that social group, she would face a lot of discrimination, right, in joining that social group. That's a good one. There's another one connected to the mathletes too, another discrimination. That's a good one. Yeah. Right. They chose the girl when they were on the what was it? It was like state finals or something, right? Yeah, heavily attended by 9 people. But what about when Kevin Napur asks Katie to join the mathletes? What does he say? Do you remember? Anyone got a good memory? I do, but I've seen it like 6 times, so I don't think I count that. He says, hey, he's like, hey, why don't you're pretty good at math. He's like, why don't you join the mathletes? We get more money if we have a girl on our team, and we want jackets this year. That's what he said, right? So he was positively discriminating against her, right? He was asking her into the group because she was good at math, but specifically because she was a girl, right? So he purposely invited her into the mathletes because she was a girl. So that was positive discrimination. Other discrimination. Other discrimination. Let's see. Okay, let me jog my own memory here, because I have some. Oh yeah. So the first thing, so Katie is invited to sit with the plastics because she's pretty, right? Oh, that's a good one, Sabrina. I'll get that one in a second. Yeah. So why is she's positively discriminated against, right? She only gets asked to join because she's pretty, at least at first. There's other reasons too, but if she was not pretty, the plastics would never have talked to her in the first place, right? So her physical attractiveness results in them sort of positively discriminating against her. The mathletes, we caught that one, right? Oh yeah, Janice doesn't get invited to that pool party. So remember, Regina's telling the story of when they were 11 or 12 or something like that a few years ago, and she didn't invite Janice to the pool party because she thought that Janice was a lesbian, and you can't have a lesbian at a pool party with girls, right? So Janice gets discriminated against because of her sexuality, or because of her perceived sexuality, because I'm not really sure that she is gay anyway. She's dancing with Kevin Napur at the end, and she seems pretty happy with that. So it's not entirely clear if she's straight or gay or otherwise, but who knows? But either way, she's discriminated against, right? What about that? Why is that store is called 135? Why is it called 135? Right, they only carry sizes 1, 3, and 5 for women, and those are big or small sizes, ladies? Yeah, those are on the lower side of average, 1, 3, and 5. So they discriminate against people based on their size and body weight, right? If you're not below size 5, you can't shop in that store, right? And so when Regina goes to the store and the dress won't zip up because she's been gaining weight, and then it's a size 6, the dress is a size 6, and the saleswoman tells her, well, you can go to Sears, and she's like, oh, you know. But the store discriminates, right? It doesn't sell clothes to women who are larger than size 5, right? Sorry, the dress is size 5, not 6. Oh yeah, Kevin Napur. Kevin Napur says, I only date women of color. Remember that? Because who is it? I think Gretchen thinks that Kevin is into Katie, right? And so that gets back to Kevin, and Kevin's like, hey, no offense, but I only date women of color, right? He doesn't date white girls. So he's discriminating, right? And whether he's allowed to do that or not, I'll leave that up to you. But he discriminates. He does not date white women. And Sabrina's mentioned here, this was kind of a funny scene, but when they're at the table, the plastics are at the table, and Katie says she's from Africa, and Karen's like, why are you white? Right? So what's not a discrimination, Sabrina, but what is that an example of?
Prejudice, because we think people from Africa, they're black.
Yes, so the stereotype, not prejudice, but stereotype, right? The stereotype is that everybody from Africa is black, right? And we see that played out a little bit earlier in the movie when the teacher there, Miss Norbury, says she has a new student from Africa, right? And she goes exactly to the black student and says, oh, welcome. And the black student's like, I'm from Michigan. So again, the stereotype is that, everyone from Africa is black, right? And what? Katie did it too. When did she do it?
She went into lunch and she saw a group of like black students and she was like,
Oh, right. And she kind of did she greet them in Swahili? Does anyone know? In what? In Swahili? Yeah. So she greeted them in Swahili, and they're just like, "What are you doing?" Right? So she made the same kind of stereotype, right? She assumed that these black students were, maybe more recently from Africa and spoke Swahili, but no, right? So yeah, we see that stereotype being kind of used for laughs in a couple of different spots, right? Yeah, Katie says Jumbo, right? What does Sala also says here? When Katie said the teacher has like 3 jobs and assumed that she sells drugs. Is that what can we do with that accusation that Miss Norbury is a drug dealer? This is before Breaking Bad, even, right? Is that a stereotype or discrimination, or just a mean rumor? Yeah, kind of mean rumor, right? So Miss Norbury says she's a pusher, right? That she pushes people to do things, and then it gets kind of turned into the fact that she's a drug pusher, right? So it's a nasty rumor, not stereotype. I don't know that there's a stereotype of teachers dealing drugs. At least I hope there isn't.
But this is stereotype. If this is after Breaking Bad.
Yeah, only chemistry teachers though. History teachers don't know how to make drugs in an RV, thankfully. So yeah, maybe mean rumor on that one rather than any prejudice or discrimination thing. Anything else? Any other examples of discrimination that you can? There might be more. But I'm having trouble coming up with one. But if we come up with one, we can come back to it. Okay, so another thing, kind of the last thing we need to know about this oppression thing before we can move on to specific types is privilege. But I think what we'll do is we'll take a little break because we've been working really hard. So take 10, come back, and we'll talk about what privilege is, because it's a tricky concept that a lot of people don't quite understand, and so we'll try to figure it out, okay? Whoops, here we are. We're back. Hello. Um, the last thing we'll deal with oppression here before we move on to an actual kind of oppression is privilege. And as I mentioned, it's a tricky idea for some people to get their head around and kind of understand what it is and how it works. If I just asked you what the word privilege means, what would you tell me? What is privilege? What does it mean as a word?
A person have more advantage than the other.
Someone has an advantage that other people don't have? Yeah, what else?
I don't know.
Don't know it? No? Okay, well maybe this will be easier then because you don't have you don't have a pre-existing definition for it, so it might be easier that way.
You have a better.
What, say again now?
Special right.
A special right, yeah?
You have a better prestige.
Yeah, you might have a certain amount of prestige or a favor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, we definitely use it in English in a few different ways. And so a privilege is often something, that you often we think of privilege as something that's not a right, but it's like a special thing that you get to do, like it's a privilege, it's a yeah, maybe not, right? Well, yeah, sometimes we think of it that way. I don't know that that's part of the definition. Like, I think you can have a privilege that you deserve, but sometimes we think of it that way, right? Yeah, actually, that's what Gabrielle says too. She says something you maybe didn't earn yourself. So yeah, we have all these kind of ideas around this idea of privilege, and sometimes they're correct. Sometimes those other meanings will help us understand this, and sometimes they won't. But we'll work through it. So I have a little article for you to read that I posted in Microsoft Teams, and I used to use a different article for this, but I felt it wasn't. It was more confusing than anything, and so I want to try. This is only my second time through with this article talking about privilege, but I don't remember how it went last time, so hopefully it was better. But we're gonna read this short article and answer some questions so that we can understand how privilege works, because it's an important part of understanding different types of oppression. So whether we're talking about racism or sexism or religious oppression or heterosexism or whatever it is, privilege is an important part of that, part of the operation of those things, okay? So maybe what I'll do, I'm just going to have a look and remind myself how long this article actually is, if it's not that long.
It is 5 pages, 6 pages.
6 pages? Is there lots of pictures?
No.
Where is it?
Understanding race and privilege.
Thanks.
6 short pages.
6.
It's not that long.
There's no such thing as a short page. A page is a page, right?
No, like the word is.
That sounds like something I would try to tell you. Oh, guys, it's just 6 short pages. And then you roll your eyes at me and you're like, there's no such thing. Let me look here. It's not bad. Yeah, maybe it's that somewhat bad.
That's 7 long pages.
7 long pages. There's no such thing as a long page, Anna. They're all the same. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me give you. I'll give you 20 minutes, and then we'll kind of see where we are, and maybe we can answer, a couple of questions off the top, and then we'll see how it goes. Okay. So I will. Yeah. So that's in Student Portal. There's questions at the end of the article. I'll let you get started reading, and then in 20 minutes we'll talk about some of the things that we have learned. Are you okay there, Vera? You had a funny look on your face.
What's the article?
It-
Is it under files?
It's under files, yeah.
Understanding race and privilege. I don't see it.
Okay, it's, hang on. Okay, so you're in social justice. It's under general, and then files, it says understanding race and privilege.
This is all my
Huh, interesting. I'm going to Teams message it to you. Does everyone else have it?
I have.
You have it?
Yeah, under file.
Okay. I wonder what's going on with you there, Avera. Okay, there you are. Okay, but everyone else, let's take 20 minutes, start reading, and then we'll talk in a little bit, okay?
Can you put the questions on the board so we won't go back and forth?
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, Sala, if you start reading what you can, and then if we don't get through it, we'll pick it up on Monday. Okay, Avera. Oops. What just happened there? There we go, yeah. Technology is amazing, hey? Okay, good people. So how far do we make it? Halfway? More than halfway? All the way through? Part way through? Can't do it? Hello? Anybody?
Questions were not really.
They're not
Yeah.
they're not too hard?
No, they like I couldn't find the exact.
Okay, okay. It's true. You might have to sort of extrapolate a little bit. Okay, I'll tell you what. We've only got a few minutes left. It's Friday. Let's just call it there. We'll come back on Monday and we'll attack this again, okay? So that's all. I'm going to say goodbye to you online people, and we'll see you Monday, okay? Bye.